Former Titan scout Blaise Taylor has been found guilty of the murder of Jade Benning and her unborn child,
including the moment when Jade is ingesting the poison.
Prosecutors say Taylor spiked Benning's drink with a lethal mixture of dissolved cocaine.
It's a case that shocked a community to its core. A beloved expectant mother was brutally taken away, and the man responsible now faces the final consequences. What happens when the law confronts one of the most heartbreaking crimes imaginable? Many are left asking if justice has truly been served. From the courtroom verdict to the emotional aftermath, this story reveals not only the pain of loss, but also the reckoning of a life forever changed behind bars. The sentence is more than words. It marks an ending to a dark chapter and a beginning for those seeking healing. The crime and charges. The community was stunned when news broke that former Tennessee Titans player Blaise Taylor faced some of the most serious charges imaginable. Accused of slaying his pregnant girlfriend, Jade Benning, the severity of the allegations sent shockwaves through those who knew them. The charges carried immense weight, including not only the slaying of Benning, but also the tragic loss of her unborn child. This dual charge underlined the gravity of the crime, setting the stage for a trial that would hold intense emotional and legal scrutiny.
In Operation Crime and Justice, a Nashville jury finds former Titan scout Blaise Taylor guilty of fatally poisoning his girlfriend, Jade Benning, and their unborn child.
Taylor's arrest brought painful questions to the forefront. How could such a devastating act occur, and what motives lay behind it? The prosecution aimed to show a calculated and cruel betrayal. Benning's close circle described her as hopeful and excited about the pregnancy, making the accusations all the more heartbreaking. The involvement of the unborn baby in the charges elevated the case beyond a standard homicide, emphasizing the innocence lost twice over. The state's case centered on strong evidence that Taylor had intentionally poisoned Benning, spiking her drink with cocaine to harm her and the unborn child she carried. Prosecutors painted a picture of a woman who desperately wanted to keep her baby, facing harm from the man who pledged to protect her. The chilling nature of the crime raised the question: what dark actions drive someone to harm the one they supposedly love so profoundly? Taylor's defense argued otherwise, but the mounting evidence and witness testimonies quickly began to shape the narrative presented to the jury. The legal battle unfolded with tensions high, both inside and outside the courtroom. Every detail would matter, as the jury considered not just facts, but the very essence of justice. The charges themselves spelled out the seriousness. 2 counts for the slaying of Jade Benning, and 2 counts for the death of her unborn baby. With such grim accusations, the trial had a profound weight on every participant, from lawyers to family members and the public. The stakes were clear: justice for 2 lives tragically cut short. The accusation that a man could commit such acts against his own family shocked many, raising difficult questions about betrayal and violence within intimate relationships. The emotional toll rippled far beyond the courtroom, touching friends, family, and the broader community. Those who followed the case grappled with the reality of such violence happening in what should have been safe spaces. Among the most painful aspects of the charges was the idea that this was not simply a crime of passion or accident, but a deliberate and calculated act. The implications of intentional poisoning deepened the sense of horror and betrayal. It laid the groundwork for a trial that would push the boundaries of legal and ethical reckoning. As the case moved forward, it became clear that the charges set the tone for a difficult, emotionally charged trial. The weight of loss was compounded by the challenge of untangling truth from pain, motive from despair. This made the jury's eventual decision even more critical in the eyes of the public. Ultimately, while the full details and resolution were yet to unfold, the crime and charges stood as a somber reminder of the fragile nature of trust and the devastating consequences when it is broken. Behind every crime lies the story of loss, and the people forever changed by it. This truth became painfully clear as the case unfolded. The victim and impact. Jade Benning wasn't only a victim, she was also a woman that her family really cherished. You know, the kind of person who feels wrapped up in hope, even while everything feels uncertain. As she waited for her child to arrive, her pregnancy became this bright little beacon of joy and a fresh start she kept looking toward, no matter the obstacles around her. Friends and family said Jade was loving and kind of relentlessly optimistic. And that's what makes what happened to her feel even more devastating. It wasn't simply the loss of one life. It was the ending of a future that, honestly, should have kept unfolding. The emotional impact on the people she left behind has been huge. When the verdict was finally read, Benning's family was spotted collapsing into tears.
Benning's family hugging inside the courtroom in tears. Benning's father, Dennis Browning, says he has been waiting for this moment for a long time.
A kind of raw and very public grief that showed just how deep their pain runs. The courtroom seemed to echo with the weight of their sorrow, and it made it clear to everyone there that behind the big headlines were real lives torn apart by loss. They weren't mourning only Jade either. They were mourning Ivy too, the baby she was carrying, even though nobody got to meet her. Benning's determination to keep her baby, even with all the pressures she faced, kind of added this extra tragic weight to the whole story. The state argued that she did not want an abortion, and that the pregnancy was deeply meaningful to her, as well as to her family. That kind of hope made her violent death feel more senseless, somehow. The unborn child wasn't only some legal label or charge, it was a symbol of what could have been, and maybe what still should have mattered. And it didn't stay inside the immediate family either. It moved outward, touching friends, neighbors, and even parts of the local community who followed the trial closely. A lot of people said they were stunned that someone who had promise and love could end up meeting such a brutal fate. The reactions were mixed, sorrow and anger in the same breath, along with this shared wanting for justice and some kind of closure. Like everyone felt stuck waiting for the right ending. For those who knew Jade, the trial was a painful reopening of old wounds. They kept coming back to hard questions about how this level of suffering could be done inside what was supposed to be a relationship. The whole story pushed difficult conversations about domestic violence and the quiet dangers that sometimes slip around behind closed doors and seem invisible until it's too late. The loss of both Jade and her unborn child sat heavy on the public conscience, like it wouldn't let go, and it brought everyone back to the worth of life in every stage. People started talking more about how fragile pregnant women can be and why protective measures matter, especially when the danger hits the most defenseless parts. In a lot of conversations, the community's grief turned into a real nudge toward action, even if it was said in different ways. While family and friends mourned, their sadness was mixed with a relentless push for justice. They wanted it clear that the memory of Jade and Ivy wouldn't fade or get pushed aside. Their voices carried more than just heartbreak. It was accountability they were after, and also recognition of what they had lost. The whole situation felt like one shared tragedy, moving past private anguish and turning into public resolve. In the end, the story of Jade Benning shows the human cost behind criminal claims. It turns the courtroom language into something deeply personal. That emotional weight is a reminder that justice isn't only about the accused. It is also about respecting the people whose lives were taken, and about the ones who still have to live with the memory after day. As the weight of loss settled deeply on many hearts, the court faced the challenge of untangling facts amid overwhelming emotion. The trial proceedings. The courtroom became the focal point of intense scrutiny as Blaise Taylor's trial unfolded, with both sides presenting evidence and testimonies that painted starkly different pictures. From the outset, the prosecution pursued a narrative of calculated violence, emphasizing the poisoning allegation and Taylor's alleged destructive intent. They worked to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Taylor had deliberately caused the deaths of both Jade and her unborn child. Evidence presented by the state included detailed accounts of how Taylor allegedly spiked Jade's drink with cocaine, a move described as both cowardly and cruel. This poisoning claim was central to the case, as it underscored the premeditated nature of the crime and highlighted the vulnerability of the victim. Forensic experts and witnesses played a crucial role in building this argument. Taylor's defense aimed to challenge these allegations, raising questions about the evidence and seeking to create doubt in the jurors' minds. His attorney argued that Taylor would not receive parole until he was 80 years old under sentencing guidelines, framing the lengthy prison term as a form of justice and opportunity for rehabilitation. This defense approach sought to humanize Taylor while responding to the severity of the charges. Throughout the proceedings, emotions ran high as family members of the victim shared impact statements and voiced their grief. Their testimonies added a deeply human context to the legal arguments, reminding all who listened of the real lives affected.
An emotional Nigella Jackson faced the courtroom Thursday, remembering her lifelong best friend, Jade Benning.
These moments brought a solemn gravity to the trial beyond legal technicalities. Witness examinations unfolded methodically, with the prosecution examining medical experts, toxicologists, and law enforcement personnel who helped reconstruct the events leading to Jade's death. The detailed forensic testimony was key to demonstrating the connection between Taylor's actions and the fatal outcome. These moments in court shaped the jury's understanding of the case. The defense team sought to carefully undermine the prosecution's timeline and challenge the extent of evidence linking Taylor directly to the poisoning. Cross-examinations tested witness credibility and the reliability of forensic interpretations. The tension between presenting fact and raising reasonable doubt was palpable. This courtroom drama was not just about evidence, but about weighing moral responsibility, intent, and the consequences of choice. The procedural rigor required jurors to separate emotion from fact, a difficult balance when the stakes involved life and death. The trial became a crucible of justice where every detail mattered. Public attention remained high throughout, as the community watched closely for each development. Media coverage relayed the courtroom atmosphere, underscoring the seriousness of the charges and the significance of the outcome. The trial represented not only a search for truth, but a test of the justice system's response to profound tragedy. As the trial neared its conclusion, all eyes turned to the jury, tasked with deciding a fate that would echo for decades. Their decision would not only define Blaise Taylor's future, but also offer a measure of closure to those who had lost so much. With the courtroom battle behind them, the jury's verdict would soon deliver the outcome that everyone awaited. The jury's verdict. After careful deliberation, the jurors came to a swift and unanimous decision that kind of matched the weight of the offense. Blaise Taylor was found guilty on all 4 counts, 2 accusations tied to the slaying of Jade Benning and 2 more tied to the death of her unborn child. The verdict brought a real, aching sense of relief to many who'd followed the intense courtroom fight, but it also reopened old wounds for the victim's family. Their tears in the courtroom were a raw reminder of how suffering can't be fixed by justice alone. The guilty verdict kind of underlined the overwhelming evidence the prosecution put forward, and it convinced the jury beyond a reasonable doubt, not in a vague way, but pretty straight. It was clear the jury saw Taylor's actions not like accidental or side matter stuff, but as intentional and in a way that won't be forgotten. The ruling then sent this sharp reminder about accountability, especially since the loss went beyond just the adult person and included the unborn baby. It showed a justice system that is ready to acknowledge that kind of loss. For Taylor, the verdict felt like the start of a brand new reality, one where the consequences of what he did were laid out plainly and made real by law. The decision was unambiguous. No real opening for leniency on the core charges tied to the victim and her unborn child. This was one of those turning points that locked his future behind bars and also made it obvious how heavy the legal weight is that society puts on protecting life. The verdict also seemed to mirror the careful thought jurors had to bring into play with complicated questions about both adult and fetal homicide laws. Working through those legal distinctions can be hard, but the jury's clear view showed their commitment to justice on both fronts. Their strong consensus, you could say, reflected a shared determination to hold Taylor responsible for the full reach of his crimes. Public reaction to the verdict felt like mixed grief, with this careful sort of closure hovering around everything. Even though no amount of punishment could really bring Jade or Ivy back, a lot of people still treated the conviction as some kind of necessary nod to their loss. The justice system, via the jury's finding, basically said something for a mother and child who couldn't speak anymore, and in doing so, it made sure their memories were respected. The family's reaction was so deeply emotional yet still resolute, like they were moving from mourning toward healing and maybe even a thin thread of hope for what comes next. Being there in court, taking part in that legal milestone, showed the real human price under all the headline noise. The verdict turned the community's shared sorrow into something sharper, along with a stubborn insistence on justice. Taylor's guilty status threw a long shadow over his earlier life as a professional athlete, like his reputation couldn't stand up to the damage when trust is broken in the most egregious ways. The verdict seemed to wipe away any last remaining question about his responsibility, presenting the act in plain, stark terms. And yeah, even if the verdict itself was definitive, it was still only the starting point, because the sentencing phase was next, and that part opens up a more nuanced back and forth about what justice actually means for the man who was convicted. Questions about how severe the punishment should be lingered in the air, weighing retribution against deterrence, while also asking whether redemption is even possible. The weight of this verdict now set the stage for the next chapter, determining the sentence that would accompany this grim conclusion, a decision that would resonate for decades to come. With the jury's verdict delivering certainty about guilt, the courtroom turned toward what punishment would best serve justice and the community's hopes. Sentencing debate. The sentencing phase brought its own complexities as the jury faced the difficult task of deciding between life imprisonment with or without the possibility of parole. This decision was not just about punishment, but also about weighing the potential for rehabilitation against the severity of the crime. Taylor's attorney highlighted that even if parole were granted, Taylor would likely remain behind bars until well into old age, framing the sentence as a stringent restriction on his future. Prosecutors advocated for a life sentence, emphasizing the irreversible harm Taylor caused, not only ending one life but two, and fracturing countless others. The state pointed out that the harshest penalty available, the death penalty, was not pursued, but life imprisonment was essential to uphold justice and community safety. Their argument highlighted the need to protect future victims and honor the memory of Jade and her unborn child. The presence of parole as an option opened debate about the meaning of justice and the possibility of redemption. Supporters of a parole-eligible sentence argued that it allowed for a path to rehabilitation for those willing to take responsibility and work towards change. They underscored that Taylor would still spend decades in prison, providing a measure of safety while acknowledging human capacity to evolve. Opponents viewed parole eligibility as too lenient, given the premeditated and heinous nature of the crime. For many, the gravity of betraying and ending the life of a pregnant woman left little room for mercy. Their stance reflected a desire for sentencing that matches the depth of harm, sending a broader societal message that such actions have irreparable consequences. Legal experts noted that parole eligibility in such cases is not immediate and involves a rigorous review process. This nuanced understanding helped the jury grapple with the practical realities of life imprisonment and parole, balancing punishment with the legal structures in place. The long wait before parole eligibility reinforced the seriousness of the sentence. Family members of Jade expressed that the best outcome would be life in prison, hoping that Taylor would never walk free to threaten others again. Their voices gave a human face to the debate, urging the court to consider the lasting impact of his actions on those who survived. Their emotional appeals underscored a plea for justice that protects the vulnerable. The jury ultimately leaned toward a life sentence with parole possible decades later, reflecting a blend of legal pragmatism and emotional weight. The sentence meant Taylor would spend the majority of his life incarcerated, effectively closing the chapter on his freedom while leaving a narrowly defined possibility for change. It was a conclusion that tried to balance justice and the potential for rehabilitation, however remote. This sentencing debate highlighted the broader societal challenge of punishing violent crimes while offering space for legal mercy and transformation. It exposed the tensions between retribution and hope for personal growth, a dynamic ever present in serious criminal cases. The careful deliberation spoke to the justice system's struggle to reconcile these ideals. With the punishment phase concluded, the courtroom was left to reckon with the consequences. The final reckoning for Blaise Taylor, his victims, and a community forever altered. Legal and emotional perspectives. The courtroom felt kinda heavy with emotion as attorneys, family folks, and community members reacted to what happened in the verdict and then the sentencing. The prosecution said they were pleased that justice was served, and they really stressed the need to hold Blaise Taylor to account for his actions. They also made a point about the harm done, not just to Jade Benning and her unborn child, but to the wider circle of people who were left hurting after the loss. From the state's viewpoint, the sentence was seen as a necessary signal that they are committed to safeguard the vulnerable. Defense attorneys didn't pretend it was easy. They admitted the sentence is harsh, but they leaned on the legal rules that steer punishment and parole eligibility. They argued that even though parole is technically possible, Taylor wouldn't be able to come out for a long stretch, meaning he'd be substantially older by then. In other words, they implied his real freedom is basically paused for decades. Their overall message was that the justice system is designed to balance repercussions with the chance for reform, even if the chance is pretty narrow. Family members of Jade Benning spoke with a kind of profound grief, but also a steadiness that didn't really waver. What they showed publicly, like tears and very personal testimonies, added a real human weight to what was happening in court. The death of Jade and her unborn child didn't feel like a simple statistic at all. It was painfully intimate. Their voices pushed for accountability, for healing too, and for a long-lasting remembrance of both victims. People in the community had reactions that spread out. Some were full-on heartbreak, and others seemed to feel a collective exhale, like the legal process had finally run its course. A lot of them understood that no sentence could give back the lives that were lost. Yet the decision still offered some measure of justice for everyone impacted. That shared sorrow then turned into conversations about safeguarding vulnerable people and about confronting domestic violence issues before tragedy shows up. Legal experts also weighed in, describing the case as an example of how the justice system is constantly wrestling with complicated matters, including fetal homicide laws and sentencing guidelines. In their view, the situation shows the delicate equilibrium courts try to keep, punishing wrongdoing, while still leaving room for organized possibilities of rehabilitation. Their analysis emphasized that justice in this instance has to respect both the legal framework and the emotional realities that Jade's family had to live through. Advocates for the victims kind of saw the result as, like, a clear message against violence in close partnerships, especially ones that hit pregnant women. The whole situation turned into a key reference point in neighborhood talks about prevention and support services, and their push was basically to make sure this tragedy becomes a spark for more awareness and stronger protective steps. In the courtroom, the emotional weight was intense. It served as a reminder that beyond legal choices, there are lives altered for good because of a crime. It also showed how empathy should matter inside the justice system, because every verdict, lands on real human stories. That blend of justice and compassion is what communities lean on to metabolize grief and try to heal. What Taylor's defense said, too, highlighted the rough road that comes next, not just for him, but for his family, and even the wider community trying to keep going. They stressed that the legal process should still protect fairness even when public feeling is overwhelming and loud. In that way, They offered a more nuanced view of law's role in balancing punishment with human dignity and not flattening everything into numbers. All these different angles together made a kind of mosaic response, full of sorrow, firm belief, legal complications, and also a cautious hope that in the future justice can serve both accountability and healing without losing the people inside it. From the deeply personal reactions came a clearer understanding of what the sentence meant, not only for Blaise Taylor, but for the larger lessons society must absorb. Implications of the sentence. Blaise Taylor's life sentence carries significant consequences for his future.
Finds former Tennessee Titans player scout Blaise Taylor guilty of killing his pregnant girlfriend, Jade Benning.
And sends a resounding message about the gravity of his crimes. The ruling ensures he will spend the majority of his life behind bars, with parole eligibility not expected until he reaches old age. This outcome underscores society's intolerance for violence against those most vulnerable, affirming that such offenses carry profound penalties. It also serves as a reminder that serious crimes can have lifelong consequences, bringing accountability through the justice system while acknowledging the devastating impact on the victims and their families. The lengthy prison term offers limited hope for Taylor's eventual reintegration, effectively separating him from the community for decades. This separation serves both as punishment and as protection, safeguarding others from potential harm. It highlights the seriousness with which the justice system views offenses involving intimate betrayal and fatal harm to pregnant victims. Beyond the individual punishment, the case sets a precedent that emphasizes the importance of recognizing and addressing crimes against unborn children. The dual charges for the deaths of both Jade and her baby reflect a judicial acknowledgement that life begins before birth, and that harm inflicted during pregnancy carries dramatic legal consequences. This reinforces protections for pregnant victims nationwide. The sentence also reiterates that status or past achievements do not exempt anyone from accountability. Taylor's history as a professional athlete could not shield him from the law's reach. The outcome stands as a clear reminder that justice applies equally, regardless of fame or social standing. The ruling acts as a deterrent, signaling to others that such heinous actions will meet with stringent consequences. It reinforces societal boundaries about acceptable behavior, especially within intimate relationships. This deterrence is essential to prevent future tragedies and uphold community safety. This case contributes to broader societal debates about how best to address intimate partner violence, the rights of unborn children, and the nature of punishment. It stresses the need for comprehensive approaches that combine legal action, prevention, and support. Ultimately, Blaise Taylor's sentence is a powerful statement about justice, accountability, and the enduring impact of one tragic choice on many lives. Continuing impact and healing. The aftermath of Blaise Taylor's conviction spreads way beyond the courtroom, like a long shadow that just doesn't stop. Jade Benning's family is still dealing with the huge loss, their grief tangled up with the complicated task of rebuilding lives that got fractured. For them, healing isn't some set arrival. It is more like a steady trek through recollections, sharp pain, and that stubborn empty space where two people used to be. People in the community who followed the case felt the tragedy in waves. Jade's death turned into a kind of rally point, stirring talks about domestic violence and how there is such an urgent need for preventive support networks. Local organizations have now pushed harder to offer resources aimed at shielding at-risk individuals, especially pregnant women. And this feels like a shared resolve to avoid the same kind of heartbreak happening again. This case kind of also showed those emotional scars that the victims' loved ones are left with. They have to come to terms with both the life that was taken and the justice that was finally served. You could see it in the public mourning during the trial, and at sentencing, it made obvious the real depth of human loss that hides behind that kind of cold legal language. And honestly, the courage they had to speak openly about grief, it helps bring awareness, and it encourages other people who feel something similar to actually reach out and look for help and community. Healing, though, gets tangled up with social stigma and with trauma that so often follows intimate partner violence cases. Families end up carrying two burdens at once, grieving privately and also getting watched by the public spotlight. Support from counselors, friends, and advocacy groups becomes really necessary so they can start rebuilding a sense of safety and something like hope, even when everything feels bleak. More broadly, the tragedy sparked conversations across the community about how to recognize early warning signs and step in before harm happens. Schools, workplaces, and healthcare providers have since increased their efforts to teach people about domestic safety. That proactive plan is meant to help interrupt those cycles of violence, and it shows how collective vigilance can be transformative. This difficult story reminds us of the human depth behind legal battles and the strength required to heal after profound loss. If this video helped you understand the case better, please like and subscribe for more thoughtful coverage. Your support keeps important stories alive and sparks conversations that matter.